The fastest car didn't win. What does Alpha Tauri Adidas keep? Or who do they keep? I'm covered in bees. And Sebastian Vettel is back. It's the land of the rising sun. Let's go racing.
They exist in a world beyond ours. This is Formula One.
Konnichiwa. And welcome to the LGR F1 show live this week. And it's so wonderful to be in our bespoke studio here at the Menlyn Suzuki pop-up store. I'm going to tell you about some of the cars that I've seen in the showroom, which I haven't seen before, a little bit later in the show. But let's go back to Singapore. It was great for Formula One to have another winner other than Red Bull Racing. I think everybody can agree. It was a very special race and an astonishing game of chess between Ferrari, McLaren, and of course Mercedes. Now, let's have a look at what happened. There's Carlos Sainz in all of his glory with Fred Vasseur, his first win as a Formula One team boss as well. Magnificent drive from Carlos Sainz. It was a little bit of an open goal, let's be honest, by Red Bull Racing when it came to qualifying. They couldn't get their setup correct. I mean, Max was out in Q2. It just sort of opened up the field, and it was a question who was going to capitalize on that. Sainz was brilliant in qualifying, as was George Russell, as was Charles Leclerc. There was nothing between all three of them. And Ferrari picked up and worked on a very, very clever strategy. Put Leclerc on the soft tire, try and get the jump on George Russell, which is what they did. Hamilton went wide, we all know what happened. And then Carlos Sainz had to make it all work for him. And the way that he drove was Prost-esque, in my opinion. It was so calculated, it was so clever, because the fastest car on the track was the Mercedes. Let's forget about Max Verstappen trying to come through the field, but the Mercedes was definitely faster than the McLaren and was definitely faster than the Ferrari. But Carlos Sainz was so clever in the way that he made sure that Lando Norris had the DRS when Lando needed it, in order not to lose the place and the pace to the Mercedes. Because I think had George Russell managed to get past Lando Norris or Lewis Hamilton, they would have maybe made easy pickings of Carlos Sainz. But that was just a fantastic drive. Sainz was masterful and won a brilliant, brilliant race. Does this mean, however, that Red Bull Racing have fallen foul to TD18? For those who don't remember, TD18, Technical Directive 18, the Flexi Wing and Floor Technical Directives, according to Christian Horner, had zero effect on the Red Bull. But I can tell you that a leading aerodynamics expert has a slightly different story when it comes to what happened with the Flexi Wing and Floor Technical Directive. An aero expert sat and decided, listen, let's go to a circuit that is relatively simple or similar in characteristic to the Singapore Grand Prix layout. And basically they went to Zandvoort. Now in Zandvoort we know we had inclement weather, we had strange weather. And all this person actually did, this aero expert, was sit and go, hold on. Let's see the speed differential going into a tight corner at the end of the straight in Zandvoort and the difference it has in Singapore. With all of the calculations and mathematics that they did, this person came out and surmised that Red Bull had lost roughly 0.2 of a second from Zandvoort. Whether or not that is true, we're not entirely sure. But Lewis Hamilton has come out and said something's up if Red Bull doesn't win the F1 Japanese Grand Prix by 30 seconds. I think what he's saying is, you know, if they don't dominate as they have throughout the whole season besides Singapore, then perhaps Technical Directive 18 could be a little bit of a factor. One other idea or reason that we have to look at with Red Bull Racing not performing that well in Singapore is perhaps because they've stopped development on this car completely. This is the final package that we're going to have from Red Bull going forward. We know that there are some updates coming from Mercedes, from McLaren, from Ferrari for the rest of the season, but Red Bull have basically stopped. Anyway, the anticipation is killing me because I can't wait to see whether or not Red Bull can be as dominant as they were. It's all going to happen, as of course, from tomorrow morning. However, weather's going to play a factor. Even though on Sunday we're expecting a dry race, we could have a very, very crazy qualifying on Saturday. The other question is, why is this car, Ferrari, so quick? Monza, they were decent, and Singapore, yeah, they were fast again. Charles Leclerc has come out and said, well, he reckons that after Zandvoort, after troubleshooting with the SF23, that Ferrari have found various aspects, and all of a sudden this is now leaning itself to Carlos Sainz's driving style as opposed to Charles Leclerc. And I don't believe that Charles is now trying to make any kind of excuse. I think he's just sitting and saying, you know what, it's terrific that both of the drivers are up there. That qualifying in Singapore was a couple of hundredths of a second. It could have gone either way. But Carlos Sainz definitely has stepped up, and he's doing a fantastic job, as is Charles Leclerc. He was on a different strategy in Singapore. He did what he could in order to protect Carlos Sainz. Of course, the double stack, he did lose 1 or 2 positions. Wasn't anybody's fault. But I think Charles Leclerc did an outstanding job in Singapore. So take nothing away from him. Another question, what happened to Aston Martin? Okay, this is a team that have been so fantastic during the course of the season. Zandvoort, they were okay. Monza, they were fish, sort of around there. In Singapore, they were nowhere to be seen. Alonso has come out, and that is his brand new helmet that he's going to be wearing this weekend, which is just beautiful in Japan. He said they found out something in the suspension of his car during the race. So he's not too concerned about it, and they're hoping that that's going to be rectified for this weekend in Suzuka. Aston Martin should be good this weekend. Also, they had one major issue this past weekend, and that was they only had one car. Now look at this image, and you know, when I saw these pictures come out, it just brought back too many horrific memories of 1994. Because the crash was not dissimilar to Ayrton Senna's crash. And Lance Stroll, as you can see in this image, I mean, that car is destroyed. And Lance Stroll managed to just get out of his car, was a little bit rattled, went to a medical center, he's fit, he's going to be racing this weekend. It just shows you the incredible improvements when it comes to safety in Formula One. That picture just haunts me. It really, really does. And the next one haunts me just as much, and I'm sure many who watch the show know of a picture where people, you know, with Photoshop or whatever, made a picture of Senna actually climbing out of his car, which is what everybody wanted back in 1994 at the tragic race at Imola. But these two pictures of Lance Stroll just haunt me terribly, and I just sit there and say thank goodness for the safety of Formula One. And we must never ever forget how dangerous motor racing is, and how lucky many drivers are. So there we go. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll, I think, is going to be fine for this weekend, which is great, and a testament to the safety of Formula One. That's a look back at Singapore. I've got a little bit more coming up in a short while. And coming up, some news. So I was just watching that ad on the Grand Vitara, and here, of course, we are in our bespoke showroom at Suzuki Menlyn Shopping Centre. There is a Grand Vitara over here, and it is the all-grip hybrid. It's the first time I've seen this. Head-up display, 360 camera. It's a fantastic, fantastic car. And then another car that I've never ever seen before, apparently brand new. It's called the XL6. Okay, man, I got to tell you, super, super impressed. Willie, if you're watching, anyway, okay, let's get back to Formula One and some news. Oscar Piastri, wow, this guy's doing a brilliant job in Formula One, pushing Lando Norris, which is what McLaren want, because they want both of their drivers really up there. He's doing a brilliant job, and they have just re-signed or renegotiated Oscar Piastri's contract until 2026. Now, I'm not sure if it's the end of 2026 or the end of 2025, but I think it's up to 2026, because in 2026 we have all of these new technical changes in the world of Formula One, and we don't know who's going to actually be where at that stage. But I think it's brilliant news for Oscar Piastri, a super, super talented driver. What would a show be without Eva Green? Ah, there we go. A triple header of Eva Green. There we go. I can see Jaco is really enjoying Eva Green. He's keeping her up on the screen. Okay, Eva, thanks for joining us. Wonderful. Here is an interesting image. Just have a look at it, and then I'll explain it. Okay, so have a look. Here it is. Yeah. Okay. You just look at that for a couple of seconds, and then I will tell you what it all means. That is not the driver salaries, by the way. Those are the amounts that each driver has cost their team so far. And you sit there, Logan Sargent only earns $1 million a year, and he's already done $2.7 million damage. But if you look at the two Ferraris, they're at $3 million together. Okay, so these things are very, very expensive. All right, before we continue, just a couple of nice messages. Roland says those monocoques are super, super tough. Vettel is back. Why and for whom? Patience, Rita, patience. We will get to that in a short while. She says that was an airy picture. Yeah, I think, you know, when I saw it, I was, yeah, I got perplexed. Christian is bluffing, doesn't want to show his hand or weakness. Okay. Live on Tiny's pit box, cool stuff. Evening everyone, that's Selwyn, nice, there we go. Keep the messages coming in. I will try, if there are any questions, I will answer them. Evening Emil, evening Roland, lovely. Okay, brilliant, brilliant stuff. Okay, so where were we? We were Oscar Piastri, the damages. Oh, there we go. Want to go back just a little bit to the Singapore Grand Prix, and we have to discuss poor George Russell. What a race from this young guy. There's, you know, so many rumors in the world of Formula One that he's becoming too arrogant and he's not fun anymore or whatever. He's out there to try and do a job, and that job is to match and even beat Lewis Hamilton. Started off the season right up there. Lewis seems to have caught him, and George was having a brilliant, brilliant Singapore Grand Prix. Now, for those who know a little bit about the history of Formula One, who have read about the early days, the days of Fangio, the days of Ascari, the days of Sterling Moss, when these guys raced at circuits like Spa-Francorchamps and Monaco especially, they didn't have Armco barriers as they have today. They had straw bales, all right. And these drivers would drive within millimeters where they could actually feel the car just brushing very lightly against these straw bales. That is the precision it takes to be a Formula One driver. When George Russell crashed, if you noticed, right in front of him there was Lando Norris. Lando Norris just touched the Armco, and somehow George seemed to follow him by 2 millimeters and hit that Armco, and all of a sudden that was the end of his race. I heard the team radio, or pit radio afterwards, and George Russell was quite vocal about his frustration. And if you watch the post-race interviews, he was distraught about making that kind of mistake. That is the level that these drivers are at every single lap. And I mean, to do that around a street circuit at night, cameras flashing all over the place, you know, it just shows you that one little mistake just actually shows you how good all of these racing drivers are. I'm sure George will bounce back this weekend. Alfa Romeo had a very poor outing in Monza. They also had a very average to poor outing in Singapore. But Guan Yu Zhou, who's just signed a new contract for Alfa Romeo, he says that this weekend the circuit should suit them a lot better. He says, we expect a proper step forward as the track layout is meant to suit our car better. I've heard this too many times from this team, unfortunately, and I can't believe it, that there's going to be this huge turnaround for Alfa Romeo this weekend. Perhaps they have also fallen to the TD18, the flexi wing, because in Singapore they really were nowhere. I mean, that car was not good at all. Alpha Tauri, okay, who used to be Scuderia Toro Rosso. And prior to that, were they Minardi? No, Red Bull was Minardi. I can't remember. Okay, Scuderia Toro Rosso, Alpha Tauri. Big talk about a new sponsor coming in next year. There was a lot of talk that it was going to be Hugo Boss. Now, all of a sudden, it could be Adidas. Imagine Adidas F1. I think that would be pretty cool. They are going to have a new boss at Alpha Tauri Adidas next year. Franz Tost, of course, will be leaving his post at the end of this year, going into retirement. And former Ferrari strategist Laurent Mekies is going to be the boss at that team. However, he will fall under the guise of Red Bull, not necessarily Christian Horner, but more likely Helmut Marko, especially when it comes to driver decisions. They have a problem. They've got Yuki Tsunoda, who I think is doing a fine job. They've got Danny Ricciardo, who's got a broken hand at the moment, who was brought in to replace Nick de Vries. And, of course, they have the super talent, Liam Lawson. Lawson was thrown in the deep end, one free practice going into Zandvoort. Drove a brilliant race, 7 pit stops in his first ever Grand Prix, went to Monza, was superb, and came here to Singapore and landed up scoring a point. Now, you put him on the backbench to be a reserve driver? I don't think so. You've got to give the guy a chance. Tsunoda's still young. He's got the Honda backing behind him, but we don't know where that's going to go. And then, of course, you've got Danny Ricciardo, who we all love, but is he the right person to put into that seat? It's not like a Nico Hülkenberg. It doesn't feel like it's a Nico Hülkenberg situation. What would you do? If you were Laurent Mekies or Helmut Marko, would you choose Tsunoda and Ricciardo, Tsunoda and Lawson, or Ricciardo and Lawson? Let me know. Okay, we'll go through that in a short while. Okay, coming up, we go and look forward to Suzuka 2023. George Russell. Sowen says that moment will play over and over for a few races to come. Yeah. Amazingly, I actually read a wonderful piece by Martin Brundle saying that 30 years after he'd left the sport, he still has, you know, I won't say nightmares, but he still has memories of times where he made mistakes. And I think this one for George is going to hurt. I do agree. Colin says, Adidas F1. Roland says, Tsunoda and Lawson. Rika says, I believe Ricciardo's at an end. Yeah, I think this is a really tough call for the bosses at Alpha Tauri or whatever they're going to be called. I would prefer, personally, to see Tsunoda and Lawson as the two drivers that steer that team forward. But I'm not the boss. There's been talk for a good few years, and you know, if you go back to the 80s, there were 12 teams on the Formula One grid, and then eventually it was 10 teams. And for the last year and a bit, we've heard about Andretti coming in. There was another American team. Then, you know, there were various people prospecting to get into the world of Formula One. Is there anything wrong with having an 11th team in Formula One? I think 22 cars on the circuit or on the track at any time, I think would be fantastic for the sport. However, it is a little bit confusing because it all comes down to the Concord Agreement and what is agreed between Formula One management, Formula One, and the teams. Who gets what of the pie of the TV money? And at present, it is divided into 10, divided by 10. And I'm not saying equally, because Ferrari get X and Mercedes, etc., and all depending on where you finish in the Constructors' Championship will determine how much more money you receive on your TV revenue monies. However, it also determines how much more you have to pay to Formula One for your entry fee for the following year. So that's where it becomes a little bit of a problem, that the other teams sit and say, well, hold on a second. If you're a team like Haas, okay, or Williams, and at the end of the year you get $30 million from the TV money because you came last in the championship, and now there are 11 teams and you come second last in the championship, the other team comes last, let's say, for example, but now you get $20 million, you're not going to be happy. Okay. Zach Brown from McLaren has come out and he has said that as long as the quality of the 11th team is decent, it will not dilute but add value to the existing teams under the right conditions, which is basically saying nothing. You know, what are those conditions, Zach? You know, what is a quality team? So I just read that and I go, oh, that's a whole lot of absolute nothing. We've got to leave this up to Formula One. I know that they're in negotiation with Andretti and with Cadillac or Chevrolet or something maybe to come into the world of Formula One. But I think it is still a long way to go, and let them finish and negotiate how they're going to do it. Once they can get that sorted out, then they can go to the other teams and say, okay, we're bringing this in. However, you're still going to get X, Y, Z or whatever, because I think there's a long way to go when it comes to Formula One. At Zandvoort, at Monza, and also a little bit at Singapore, we saw a trend which is not something that we have not seen before, but it is not a lot of fun. And that is when we get into qualifying, the guys are trying to find space on the track, they bunch each other up, and we have this sort of, I don't know, comedy of errors when it comes sometimes to qualifying. As much as the stewards and the FIA sit there and say you must finish the lap in X amount of time through your delta and you can't go too slow over here, it doesn't really work out. Alonso has come out and said the format for Formula One qualifying is a little bit archaic. And Lando Norris has come out and said no one actually gives respect to the other drivers on the track. And you go, well, you know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Norris said F1 drivers don't care enough about impeding in qualifying. Now, whether or not that is on a fast lap or whether or not that is actually just a bunching up to try and give yourself space and get your tires into the right temperature, I'm assuming he's talking about when you're on a flying lap. What about changing qualifying? Go back to that single one lap shootout. Top 10 guys go, you go out, next person goes out, next person goes out, whatever. I believe that added an incredible element of excitement. But, you know, I don't know. What are your thoughts on qualifying? Should they leave it the way that it is? Should they perhaps introduce maybe a single lap qualifying, one at a time? I don't know. I like the way that qualifying is at the moment. I just don't like this bunching up and trying to fight for position on the track. I just find it a little bit nonsensical. Let me know in your comments. This weekend it is the land of the rising sun, Suzuka. Look at that. That is just an iconic photograph. And let me tell you, the fans in Japan are like no other you will ever find in the world. This was a little bit earlier today. Some of the people managed to get onto the track. Look at that man, Alpha Tauri. He's got a DRS on his head and it's operational. You will not find fans like this anywhere in the world. This is definitely on my bucket list, and I would love to go to watch a Japanese Grand Prix. I think more to actually just see the fans than the race as well. The circuit is a true test of courage. It is one of the most magnificent circuits. 130R, look at that, it backs over itself. It is a true racing circuit. We've got an amazing long straight into turn one, great overtaking opportunity, and then of course also going through sector 2 and 3, you know, you've got a chance there to pass at 15, 16 as well. This is, I mean, some of the titanic battles that we've had over the years in Suzuka are just incredibly memorable, and I'm sure you have some of your favorites. I'm just thinking of one, Felipe Massa and Robert Kubica years ago in the rain. Just something very, very special. And watch out, friends, for turn 2, because Sebastian Vettel is back. No, he's not replacing Lance Stroll. Turn 2 curbs go black and yellow for Vettel's B project. How's that? Biodiversity project of Sebastian Vettel. Turn 2, we're going to have yellow and black, and it's going to be called the buzzing corner. Vettel is there as well. So if Lance Stroll is not 100%, we might see Sebastian Vettel jump into a car, which I think many of us would love. I mean, imagine Vettel and Alonso. Oh, wow. What a dream team. What a dream team. This weekend, here are some statistics about the Japanese Grand Prix. There we go. First held 1987. They are our winners over the last 5 years. As you can see, Red Bull and Mercedes have dominated. So let's hope, let's hope for something different this weekend. Lewis believes that Red Bull should come out and blast everybody else off. But over the last Grand Prix, one doesn't really know. Who will win this weekend? I don't know, but I can tell you that tyres will play a factor. Safety car or virtual safety cars, more than likely, there's a high probability that can happen. And of course, the weather. We never know what the weather is going to do in Suzuka. It's not as bad as when it was in Fuji, but you never know what's going to happen. Tyre-wise, we've got Pirelli. We've got the C1, the C2, and the C3. They are the hardest of the compounds in the ranges for Pirelli. The track is incredibly taxing on the cars. Lots of low speed and high speed corners, long straights as well, hard on braking on the cars as well. So expect an array of strategies, more than likely favoring the C2 medium tire, and then of course the C1 on the hard compound. However, this all depends on whether or not we have safety car interventions or not. Interesting weather predictions for this weekend. Looks like there could be some rain tomorrow during free practice, and on Saturday there is a chance that there could be some thunder showers. If that happens during qualifying and we have a mixed up grid as we did in Singapore, well, then we're in for another astonishing race this weekend. Sunday, it looks as though it is going to be dry, and looks like it's going to be a dry race. And finally, it's an early start for us tomorrow from 4:30 until 5:30, practice 1. We've got 8 through until 9, practice 2 on Saturday, 4:30 to 5:30, 8 until 9. And then, of course, the race this coming Sunday, the 24th of September, that is going to be at 7 a.m. Lastly, got to say, the Boks playing against Ireland on Saturday. I think there's going to be a humdinger in the Rugby World Cup. So I'm really looking forward to that. But I'm especially looking forward to this weekend's Japanese Grand Prix. Just want to see if there are any final comments that I've missed here. Who's Red Bull blasting off? Asking for a friend. Oi, the weather from Rika. I know. What a dream team, Karen says. Would be amazing, Vettel and Alonso. I think that would be something very, very special. There we go. A big thank you, Pierre and Jaco, who are administering and driving the show this evening. Also, my son Claudio has been with me as well, so it's magic to have him along as well. And of course, as always, for your company, thanks for watching the LGR F1 show. Enjoy the Japanese Grand Prix, and I'll catch up with you very, very soon. Let's go racing.